Head over to miniaturemarket.com where they have thousands of board games at discounted prices, and you can sign up for product alerts. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. You're about to see my Allegro 1-minute overview and final thoughts. This is designed to see if this game warrants more of your time. If it does, just keep watching because then you'll see my full intro overview and final thoughts. However, if you don't want to be spoiled anything and you want to skip right to the full review, use the time index below in YouTube. Ghosted is a deduction game for 3 to 6 players where you're trying to figure out who killed you, Preston Pinewood. How? Toilet plunger? Why? Because I called myself an influencer. You're randomly given a suspect weapon and motive that you can't see, but you can see everybody else's and mark them off because you know none of those are yours. But you'll also get a handful of cards as well to mark off different things. Turns are simple. Roll a die and do what it says. Ask any player about 2 suspects. If they have one, they must secretly show it to you. You know that's not yours now. You can do the same for weapons or motives. You can get a wild, which is anything, or you can actually guess your motive, suspect, and weapon. They'll tell you how many you get right. But the coolest one is asking any yes or no question you can think of. Like, does my suspect have the same first and last initial? Or is it below the witch's potion on the board? Anything you can think of. First one to get all 3 right is the winner. A modern twist on the old-fashioned Clue with cool twists on suspects, weapons, and motives. Has great art. There's no rolling and moving. It doesn't take the worst parts of Clue. It removes those from the game. The actions are random, but you get to choose who to ask. Great strategies there. And I like that if you get stuck, there's a way to get out of that and ask anything out from anybody. You get to learn on other people's turns, which is a good sign in any deduction game. You can ask open-ended questions that give you the utmost flexibility and freedom. First shown in Mystery of the Abbey. Best part of the game is coming up with clever questions for people. It scales with a different amount of player counts, and you're really just trying to figure out who it is. It's really good. Now, the cards themselves are a little too thin. That could be a problem. You might want to sleeve these because if a corner gets folded, you'll know who did it. But overall, the game is really good. It might be a little too random for some hardcore deduction fans, but for a mass market game that's in the Clue atmosphere, it's culturally relevant, new and fresh. If you like that style of game, this one to check out, that's Ghosted. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today you've been killed, or ghosted as we say, and you need to figure out the suspect, weapon, and motive that did it. It's sort of a deduction style, Clue-like game for the new mass market family game. Let me show you how it's played. I'll see you on the other side. Ghosted is a mass market family style deduction game where you've been killed and you're trying to figure out who did it, how they did it, and why they did it. Like Preston Pinewood killed me with a toilet plunger because I called myself an influencer. Or Gus of Gasket killed me with a pickleball paddle because I used a speakerphone in public. You're trying to figure out which suspect, motive, and weapon was used to kill you. Now, there's all sorts of type of weapons that are in this game that you could be killed by. A selfie stick, 3-hole punch, harpoon, flamethrower, murder hornets, power washer, slingshot, witch's potion, battle axe, or a tank of piranhas. And the types of motives in the game are just as fun. Road rage, hoarded toilet paper, this must have been done in COVID times, chewed too loudly, sold secret family recipe, blocked on social media, left cap off toothpaste, blasted smooth jazz, gave a 1-star review, jealous of karaoke skills, and knew too much. Each player is given a suspect, weapon, and motive that they don't get to see. This is us, these cards are facing everyone else. These are the other players, we get to see theirs. There's only one of each card. So for example, we know that road rage can't be the motive for the reason why we were killed because it's already here. Same for hoarded toilet paper and knew too much. So for each of these motive, suspect, and weapons that you can see from other players, we can already rule those out. Those aren't ours. So for example, I know that I am not any of these suspects, any of these weapons, or any of these motives. And all the other cards are shuffled out and dealt out evenly, so you secretly get to know other information and you have a hand of cards. So after looking at my own cards, I can mark those off and I know even more information. Turns are very simple. You're going to roll this dice and you're going to take the action. This is guess 2 suspects. You get to choose any player, not just the player to your left, any player, and you guess any 2 suspects. And what you're trying to find out is, hey, maybe you're asking about 2 suspects that you're trying to figure out about, and you might say, hey, do you have Preston Pinewood and Cash 401k? And if they have one, they will give it to you, and you secretly get to look at it and go, okay, then you give it back to them. If they have more than one, they still just show you one. Same thing happens and then it'll be the next player's turn. But if you roll this, you do the same thing, but it's weapons. Here, same thing, but motives. Now there's a couple of things that was wild you could roll, and this you could use any of these. This one is really cool. It's the coolest action in the game. Is you can ask any question that ends in yes or no. You might say things like, is your first and last initial the same letter? You might say, on your board, is the weapon below the witch's potion? You can make up any question you can think of, which is really cool. This game gives you a lot of freedom. And if you roll the scales of justice, you guess your suspect weapon and motive, and the players will just tell you how many of those you got right. They won't tell you which ones, but you'll know if you're on the right track. That is pretty much the game. When it's your turn, if you think you know the answer, you can pretty much say it. If you got all three right, you win. If you got them wrong, they'll tell you no, and you're out of the game. You cannot win, but you still have to give people answers to their questions with the cards and such. One last aspect, let's say you roll this and you already know your suspect. You gain a token. I think it's this side right there. And then next time you roll a die and you have something that you roll something again that you already know, if you have one of these, you turn it in and you can basically do any of the dice face. That keeps you from getting stuck. That is it. The first one to figure it out is the winner. All right, let's talk about let me first talk about my biases. When I was a kid, Clue was my favorite game. I played the heck out of this thing. I even still play it every once in a while now. If somebody asks me, I'll still play it. I like it. I'm still surprised at how well it does hold up. But it's an older game and it's probably longer than it needs to be, and rolling and moving around the board is probably a part that I don't like. But what I like about this is it is a modern twist on that deduction style Clue-like game. Not only on the game itself, but also on the types of suspects, weapons, and motives. Selfie sticks, pickleball paddles, giving a 1-star review, blasting smooth jazz. Cool and fun stuff to bring it to the modern era, so I like that aspect of it. But this isn't just a Clue clone. It's very different from that in many aspects, where you're trying to figure out what's in front of you and you can see everyone else's. Many other games have done that recently like this, but this is the first one that sort of made its way in the mass market doing this. The art in the game is great. All the cartoony, fun little art, it really draws you in. It makes you laugh and smirk at these different things. It's definitely a positive here. I love that, like I just mentioned, Clue, one of the parts I didn't like about Clue, even though it's a game I loved as a kid, rolling and moving. It just made the game longer than it really needed to be, and that was the least fun part, was rolling and moving around. It's like, oh, I don't get to go anywhere this turn. Oh well, next turn, and this, you get to do something. Sure, you're rolling a die, but that's just to randomize what you can ask about. So even though the actions are random, which some people might go, I don't like that. You get to choose who to ask. Again, unlike Clue, where you have to ask the person to your left, here you get to ask anybody. So someone might have just asked something and you're like, I think they're bluffing. I think one of the ones they just asked about was one they have. I'm gonna ask them for that one directly. So you can really, even though you're randomizing what you're asking, you don't randomize who you ask, and that's a really big positive of this game. Even one of my favorite deduction games, Sleuth, did this, where it was the randomized cards. You get to ask who you want. One step better, I think, than the original Clue. It works really well. I like that you can, over the course of the game, if you know your thing and you roll the die and you're like, it's not a lost turn, really, because you get a token. And then if you do it again, if you roll something that you already know, you can turn that token in and ask anything. You can do anything. So it kind of balances itself out. It keeps you from getting stuck towards the end. I like that sort of little design fix they got there. I love that you're learning info on other people's turns. A good deduction game, you will be into it on every turn because you're going to learn something. Like, oh, this person just asked about this, this, and this. I know about these two. This person doesn't have these two things. They showed them something. I know they have that. And it just works really well. It's simple, it's light, but it works well. I love my favorite part is the one where you can ask your own open-ended yes or no answer question. In my recollection, the first game to do this was Mystery of the Abbey, which was a very well-produced Days of Wonder game back when they were a new publisher. And it's still to this day, many people love that game, Mystery of the Abbey. This was the best part of that game, by the way. Coming up with questions that are creative, right? That you can, and if you get really creative, you can ask questions that are pretty broad, but that other people won't know what it means if you ask someone. And it's such an open-ended thing. I love the aspect of this. Like, you might take a card that you already know what the person to your left already looked at. You already showed it to them. You have that marked down. So you might go, okay, you see this person's name? You see the first letter it starts with? Yes. Does my suspect start with the first letter that comes before this in the alphabet? Now, you've just not given them any extra information. You haven't given anybody else any information, but you're getting something that you need. It's really clever. Best part of the game actually is that. On the negative side of things, this is a mass market game. The cards, even though they look awesome, they're very thin. I mean, paper thin. They bend really easily. You might want to sleeve these cards because if one gets nicked in a deduction game or a corner folded, it kind of ruins the game. And unfortunately, this is a mass market game. It's trying to get in at a certain price point. I get why they have to cut corners at certain spots, but it can be an issue. The cards are very thin. Some questions can possibly backfire. I just talked about how awesome that open-ended questions are. You've got to look at you've got to show everyone all the cards. Maybe there should be something like one big player aid that shows all the art on the cards, or maybe you should just let everyone look at all the cards first, because we had a game where someone asked the open-ended question, can I hold the murder weapon that killed me in one hand? Or something like that. And we looked at the murder bees in a bottle, and we're like, yeah, you can hold that with a hand. Well, it completely screwed him up, because for the rest of the game, he was never going to get it, because he thought of murder bees as flying around bees. You're never holding them in one hand. But in the art, you're holding the bottle of the bees. He's like, I didn't know the bees were in a bottle. So sometimes things can backfire. I wish there had been maybe a player aid of all the art, just one little sheet. You could pass around and say, hey, here's all the art. You know, if you're thinking of a question, this might help you, something like that. Minor nitpick though. Also, the game, because even though you get to pick who you ask the questions to, you're rolling to figure out what you're going to ask. It might be too random for some hardcore sleuths, but I think it's a good balance of strategy and luck. So if you're looking for a mass market, modern, culturally relevant game in today's that plays similar like Clue, but faster and easier and possibly even more fun, check out Ghosted. Game Toppers not only transforms your existing table to a high-quality gaming solution, they now offer full leg kits and dining cover solutions for the full table application. Paired with their amazing, thematic, premium stitch edge mats from noted board game artists like Vincent Dutray, collapsible cup holders, and really cool accessories, it's a complete system that upgrades every game you play. Go to GameToppersLLC.com or click the link below. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today, you've been killed, ghosted if I will, and you're trying to find the suspect motive, and you're trying to figure out the suspect motive and what is the third?